Hi everyone, it's Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're completing a page which is called Live Your Art, and it's just playing around in my Dina Wakley journal. In fact, this is the very last page of my Dina Wakley journal. I don't actually work consecutive pages in my journals. I kind of jump around a little bit. So this page was one I'd skipped, and it needed to be finished before I could call this book finished. I don't like having empty pages in my books. I do finish them all. So in the background, I'm just tearing up a whole heap of printables I had from some different Patreons I have. Some are from Inky Quill and some are from Little Raven Ink. Both of them had these sort of rainbow effects in the background. One with sort of scribbly pencil, one with paints. And I've just printed them out onto sticker paper, and I'm just sticking them into my book. I find if anything I have printed out, if I do it on sticker paper, it's a lot easier in the end. I don't need to worry about gluing stuff down. I can just stick it down. And the printer I have is a laser printer, so again, if I did glue it down, I didn't need to worry about ink running in the background. So there wasn't really much thought process for this, except I had these printables sitting here. They're not ones that I would probably use in any other way. I would struggle to use them, I think. I'm not sure how I would use them. I probably need to challenge myself to use them in a different way. But I knew that if I did this, I could have the rainbow colours and put colours over the top and blend it into the background. I did have some ideas of using the printable you can see there with the leaves on it. I don't think I ended up using that in the end. I just ended up using all these rainbows. And you can see I'm forcing myself to use all the scraps. So I'm overlapping stuff, tearing smaller pieces, just using up what I had basically. So now I had this, I decided I wanted to put some colour in the background. And because it was bright, I decided I was going to use my fluoros. So here I go. Something new for Niamh, using fluoros. I'm not really cleaning out my brush in between, painting over the top, just blending it all in together basically. And as I've said many times before, the fluorescent paints are translucent, so you can see what's happening underneath. So you can still see the texture and the lines in the paints. It does colour over some of the paints because they're similar in colour. But you can still see what's going on. It's not hiding it all that much. So now I'm just going in with some of my Tim Holtz stencils. These are some new stencils I bought. So I tend to, if I'm creating a page and I've got some new stuff, the new stuff gets used on this page, on the page, because it's just testing it out. I suppose a lot of people swatch stuff. For me, it's just jump in there and just use it. Force yourself to use it. And I suppose because then it's got paint or it's got ink on it, I will use it again in the future because it's not brand new anymore, if that makes sense. So it's a good way to force myself to get in and get on with what I'm doing. So these are the new gradient stencils from Tim Holtz. So you can see it starts off sort of big in the middle and goes off to a smaller gradient, which is quite cool when you're doing stuff like this. It reminds me of the fashion design plates where you'd get the gradients on them. The little rubbing ones that you used to do, if anyone remembers that, where you had the piece of paper and you put down the different plates and rub over it. So that's the sort of vibe I was getting in the background. Because this is kind of my last page and I was a little bit impatient to finish it, I didn't really have a clue of how I was going to finish it. So I turned to the Collage Collective, which is one of Dina Wakley's new things, and I decided I was going to use one of the figures from that. And I chose the one that I had partly because it was one of the biggest figures in there, but also because it had the purple in it, which was going with the oranges and yellows in the background. It had that complementary colour. I did decide that it was a little bit too bright, and I am trying to use more white in my artwork, so I thought I would put some white gesso over the back. I wish I hadn't. It dulled it down a little bit too much, but then again, here I am putting more fluorescent paint over the top, so you know, when you try and dull it down one way, you add more colour in another. So I'm going in and just adding some extra interest, putting in the stencils, putting the paint over the top, and that's what I do love about this collage collective. I struggled when I first got it because it was just using someone else's artwork in my pages. It sounds silly for someone who does collage a lot, but it wasn't mine, or I didn't have any input into it. Whereas when I started doing stuff like that, by changing up the colours, scribbling over it, putting some stencils over the top, it just made it a little bit more mine. It is still very much Dina's artwork, but I've had a hand in it, whether good or bad, putting it into my journal and just making it belong to me a little bit more. So after I've done this, I'm just going back in with Stabilo or pencil and adding in some of the lines. I do like to do this with a lot of my artwork, even with the collage figures, because it brings them to life again. You get that lovely black line again. When it's printed and then when you paint over the top of it, it dulls it down, so it just brings it back to life a little bit. The other thing I'm going in with was, while the paint is still wet, so where that gesso was, I'm just going in with a very old piece of foil that I had sitting there and just rubbing on, just to get those little glints and glimmers of foil over the top. It sticks to any gel medium or wet paint that you've got, and it just gives a beautiful little shimmer. And it's really random. You can't control where or when or how it's going to go down, but it's also a good way to use up your scraps of foil. So that's a good tip to have in your little arsenal. If you want a little bit of glimmer, chuck on some foil. So once I finished doing this, while I was doing that, I was kind of thinking, what am I going to do? And I do this a lot. While I'm thinking of what I'm going to do, I tend to pick up something else and do it. So like that foil was me kind of working out what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to put some text on here somehow, but I wasn't sure how. And then I remembered I had these Donna Downey stencils. Please excuse the light, something odd happened. So I decided that I would put this on because it was big, it was bold, and it was about the end of my journal. So I'm just using some black gesso and stamping, sponging over the top of this, just to get that Live Your Art coming up. And you can see that the foil resists the gesso, so you get these beautiful gold bits coming through your stenciling, which I really love as well. You couldn't do that if you tried, I'm sure, in any other way. So when I finished doing that, I needed to work out what else I was going to do. Was it finished? And I found this other stencil which really fitted in, which is from Scrap FX, which is Create with Passion, and it sort of really fitted onto that little circle of a shoulder really well. I did have those butterflies that I was playing with, but then I just thought, nah, that's a bit twee, just leave it as is. I do go in, I think, with a white Posca paint pen and just add a drop shadow, because I can't not do that when it is, and the same with adding in some whites to the eyes, and you can see those sort of just come alive again. I'm using quite a thick white pen. I usually use a thin one, but I really like that strong white line to my letters. It just makes them pop out from the page. So that's pretty much the end of the journal, apart from going in with a very fine pen to do the passion. I did have to prime that up a little bit just to make it all work. And that's it. So that's my final page in my Dina Wakley journal. If you haven't checked out the final flip through, you will find that on my journal, on my YouTube channel as well. So here's a close-up of how it all turned out. It was a fun page to do, a great page to finish off my journal on, and thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye for now.